Hello all, welcome to lesson 2 of the Rook Endgames series. This lesson we are going to cover this position with the rook's pawn. Well, the king is trapped in front of the pawn, can't move away because the enemy rook is cutting the way out. But in the other situation, we also have our rook cutting the king far away from the pawn. In fact, he is cut at least 4 squares away from the pawn. And so this similar position to the Scipione Lucena position we saw in lesson 1 can be won because, as we saw in the last lesson, we saw a position with a pawn, with a rook pawn, and we saw that it was a draw. But here we have time to bring our rook to help promoting the pawn. And how can we do it? We go to c2, the king of course approaches. Now we go to c8, the king attacks our rook. This is not the best defense, but we will cover the best defense in a while. And now we play rook b8, so facing the enemy rook. Of course, the rook won't take our rook because then we take back and convert with a promotion to a queen and win. So the rook moves away, and now our king can't come out. Of course, black has not many options. Tries to check the king goes to a6, checks again, goes to b6, so it can keep controlling the pawn. Another check, but now the king can move away. And notice that there is no way rook can come back to a1, because now we just promote our pawn to a queen and forcing the rook to take the queen or whatever. We will be with a queen and rook versus rook, and so keeps checking, but the checks eventually will end up. And when the rook comes back, well, then we have this situation, which is a win for white. And this is the technique. So coming from for the beginning, so we just maneuver like this to get the promotion to be possible. But let's see it again. And now just a small detail. Instead of going to d7, our king goes to d6. This is a small difference that makes it harder for the attacking side. So if you are, and I suggest that you also pay attention to defense, because in a game you can be on the side without the pawn. So the rook goes to b8. Of course, we move away. The king comes out, and then we check. And now it's not possible to get out from here with a6. Why? Because we simply check, goes to b6, but now, as you can see, our king is better placed and making a clear opposition. So the king needs to come back and can't progress. And so after a while, we are in the similar position that we saw before. So when we are in this situation, the king can't go to a6 and is forced to go to c8. So now we check again, the king goes to d8, and now we move to h1, and of course we are threatening checkmate. The king can't move, because if it moves, we'd simply check it. The king moves up, check, the king goes whatever he wants, and then we take the pawn, so it's a draw again. And if the king can't move, we are forced to deliver a check. The check is forced, and so we move the king. Now we are threatening to promote to a queen. Black has not many options over here, so it's white to play. What should we do? We need to sacrifice our rook. Check. Because if the king takes the rook, then we simply promote, the king moves away, and then we even take the rook. This is not a fortunate position for black. So the king moves to the side, and we get our rook in the perfect situation. So now we are threatening to promote, so black has really few options. If he tries to check, we just go next to the pawn again. As you notice, there is no way the rook can avoid the promotion, and so we can promote, and now it's a win. So coming to the start, notice that the key position to win with a rook pawn is to be able to cut the king 4 squares away from the pawn. Also, when you are playing defensive, the path is to go to d6 and then c6 to make it harder for white. Let's now change a bit the position of the rooks. Let's just place this rook over here and this rook down here, because that is a small detail. So we go to c1 again, so repeating the same maneuver. The king approaches. Now we go to c8, the king goes to d6 as we saw, confronting the rook. Now the rook goes to a2 and the king moves away. We check again. As we saw, the king needs to go to c8. We check again. The king goes in front and we go to the other side and we are again threatening checkmate. And now we can and we should threat the check. The king comes here and now we just check the king. And now it's not so simple. Why? Because we can and we should take the rook, because now there is a promotion, of course, no doubts about it, but now white needs to prove the queen versus rook endgame. So this is the way to win with white, but it's not over yet. And both for the attack and both for the defense, is important to study very well this position. And extra, you also will need to prove that you are able to win the queen versus rook endgame. If you want, you can check the series I made about the queen versus rook endgames. It will pay off. And as you saw, when you are in this position and you are defense, you are going to force white. The more that you can to prove the player dominates every technique to win. I hope you have enjoyed, and I see you in future lessons. Bye bye.